Hey, I want to welcome everybody. I do know that we look a little bit crazy, as we go through here on Facebook, but that's because of the intro that's going out via our Spreaker account. Now, I'm going to bring in our tonight's guest and Coach Swanson here in just a few moments. But this is CCA episode 10. Tonight we have Coach Robert Harmon to discuss travel ball and parent engagement. Yes, those taboo topics. And it's going to be pretty exciting to discuss those things. Coach Harmon has been coaching high school basketball for over 10 years. He has been involved in all aspects of the sport with positions ranging from boys and girls assistant coach to head coach and head girls coach, while also serving as an athletic director. As a head girls coach, he led his team to its school's first ever state tournament appearance. As a head boys coach, his team finished first in their division for the first time in 20 years. And just last year, he helped lead the American Fork Cavemen to their first 6A state championship in 40 years. Coach Harmon has also been coaching the highly competitive AAU circuit for almost 15 years and has helped countless high school athletes continue on their athletic careers to the collegiate level. Hey, I want to welcome you guys, and I'll unmute Coach Harmon here. Coach, welcome to CCA, buddy.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Now, Coach Swanson has a little bit more, history with you, so I'm going to let him kind of take over the conversation. But I have a ton of questions when we talk about this mad culture that's going on in the world of athletics today, Coach.
Oh yeah, I'm so happy to have this guest on today. You know, him and I go back quite a few years already. Can't believe that. He's the man who gave me my start at coaching, so I owe him that. And we've been through a lot together, ups and downs, triumphs and trials, all that wonderful stuff. And so I'm just happy to have him on tonight. We've talked throughout, my 2.5 years living out here in Iowa numerous times about, God knows how many things. One thing always seems to come up, though, and that's what we're going to start off right away with, and that's parents. When we talk about parents in sports, it's difficult no matter what sport you're coaching. And this is something that Coach Harmon and I talked about earlier is, why does it seem like the parent involvement and parent anger and lashing out happens more in basketball? And let's start with that. Why is basketball the one sport where it just seems parents just get outrageous, more than any other sport?
I think it starts really with the fact that they're just closer to the players or closer to the coaches and just being like more on the floor. I think for some reason that makes them feel that their voice is being heard. Especially in like the smaller schools where you got the really tight gyms. I mean, one parent in the stands, everybody gets to hear what they have to say. So, if you've got a parent that's looking for significance in some way, that's a really easy way to get it. It's just voice that more than the coach or that more than the players or whatever it is. And so I think that comes mainly from a lot of insecurities with parents. I think nowadays between social media and everything else, I think parents get wrapped up in thinking that their identity is almost matched by their kids. So, if the kid's struggling, well, then I'm a failure as a parent. Obviously, I don't know what I'm doing. And so I think a lot of times parents voice up, especially in basketball games, thinking that, if I'm loud enough, I can show the coach I know what I'm doing. My son knows what he's doing, or my daughter knows what she's doing. And so I think it's just them trying to find some significance.
Coach, do you think travel ball, when a parent's spending an enormous, I spent a lot of money, with my daughter, she was developing as a really nice catcher. Do you think that, the parent that's spending all this money and all this time and all this effort, when we look at travel ball, do you think that's why they're taking a more vested approach, when you're dealing with, like the head coach during the high school season?
I think that has a big part of it is because they are investing. I mean, sometimes, I shouldn't say sometimes, all the time, thousands of dollars for their daughter or son to play in these sports. And so I think they almost feel like their dollar amount means their kids should get more playing time, which is kind of it's kind of a give and take when it comes to the summer ball situation, because they are paying to be there. They're not paying you thousands of dollars to have the kids sit on the bench and do nothing. So I think there is this entitlement that kind of comes from travel ball. We had an incident just this summer. Kid had 4 fouls in the first half, and mom's yelling at me to put my son in the game. She's yelling at me from across the bleachers, not realizing that her son has 4 fouls with 10 minutes to go in the first half. But they just, again, I think they just think that if I prove that I know enough, if I'm loud enough, that I can prove that I know enough about the sport, that my son, my daughter's good enough. And then I think that really does translate over into season when you get into the high school season. And unfortunately, I think a lot of travel club coaches kind of exacerbate the problem because they're in there telling them, hey, your son's so great, like he should be playing more. Your daughter's so great, she needs to be doing this, she needs to be doing that. Coach has her in the wrong spot, and then mom and dad's head is, well, we're paying this guy money to play our daughter. Obviously, he's got to know what he's talking about. And so then they get into the games, and they still have that talk from the summer coach in their head, and they're like, my daughter's not a 4, she's a point guard. Like, she should be out there handling the ball. And so, then parents, again, they have this thought in their head of what their child should be instead of just encouraging them in what they're great at already.
Yeah, but before we go on any further here, Coach Swanson, I do want to let everybody know that if you have a question tonight, either via Spreaker or in Facebook, be sure to type those in, and we'll get to those questions as soon as we can. Go ahead, buddy.
Coach, you coach both, high school basketball and AAU. And so, you experience both sides of it. I know you're an honest guy and you deal with the parents on both, aspects of it. Where do you think the biggest disconnect is between most travel ball coaches and high school coaches?
Oh, you know what? That's kind of tough. And I think it depends on the coach, depends on the team. A lot of coaches use AAU as kind of like a bench way into getting into either a high school club or into a college setting of some sort. And so a lot of times I think coaches will kind of puff themselves up a little bit and try and say all the right things to help a player that may have some connection to a college. I think the big disconnect comes strictly between the coaches and the parents, that coaches are thinking this in their head to try and get more money, because that's, if you don't have the money, you don't have a team when it comes to summer. So, you're trying to fluff parents up a little bit and tell them all these great things that may not be true about their daughter or their son, trying to make sure that, hey, next year you're coming back, right? Like, prices are going to go up maybe $100 next year, but your kid's the best player on the team, so we need to make sure we have him back. So I think a disconnect happens there. A large amount of the time is just simply AAU teams trying to keep themselves going. And then personally, I think there's a huge disconnect between AAU coaches and high school coaches. And this is something I guess I had a little bit different because I was doing both. But before I was doing both, even when I was doing summer ball and then I was coaching high school on the side, I really tried to go to the coaches, and I wish more AAU teams would do this, is if their coaches, the AAU coaches, go to the high school coaches, like, hey, you know what? I've got little Billy over here who's going to be playing on my summer team. What do you need him to be great at coming into next year? You tell me what he needs to be great at, and I'm going to help make your players the players they need to be when you can't be with them all the time, when you're not there with them in the summer all year. Tell me what I can do to help your squad, because then what that does is makes a connection then between both coaches, to where when a kid wants to come and play for you, rather than coach me, no, don't go to that guy, he doesn't know what he's talking about, we've had problems before. They're going to be much more willing to be like, yeah, absolutely, having a summer with him, that'd be great for you. Like, he's really great at developing players. All my players have played for him before, and look at all these accolades we have. So really, I think if each coaching staff, the AAU and the high school, would get together first and discuss what would be best for the player, and then out of that, you'd have that conversation with the parent as well, and you have the high school coach on the same page, you have the AAU coach on the same page. Now you're coming to the parent and saying, this is what Billy needs to be great at. That's really more difficult to argue when you're coming from two different points of view, and the parent's still thinking, oh, well, my son's, point guard when he, can't dribble with his left hand still. So having those 2 points of view, I think, really would help a lot. And I think if AAU coaches would swallow their pride a little bit, and I think if high school coaches would swallow their pride a little bit, because I think a lot of people get stuck in wanting all the accomplishments to come from them. That if a player's great, it's because he was on my team. If a player's great, it's because I taught him that. If we could let go of that and just like, what can we do to make him great rather than I did it, I think we could help a lot in between that disconnect we have.
Perfect world, Coach. If you were the so let's say you're the head coach, and you want to build your culture, and you want to surround it towards everybody working together to get rid of all this madness that can take place from parents, community, administrators, other stakeholders, whatever. How do you pull everybody together? What kind of a plan, what kind of an action step would you take to make sure that you wouldn't have those issues?
I think the first thing you have to do is just understand like a line of communication. You need to make sure that the parents understand that, if you want my job, the position was open. You could have easily applied for it. If they felt like you were the best one for it, you would be where I'm at right now. It didn't go that way. So you need to put your faith in me, have trust that I will have your child's best interest at heart, and that we're trying to build something greater than what just your child's name is, right? Like I always say, you got to play for the name on the front to deserve your name on the back, right? So you got to make sure that make sure the parents are understanding that you're building a culture, you're building something greater, that like when your younger kids are coming through, that they can look back and say, hey, you know what? I played high school there. I got to play for that coach. I got to do this. So that's, again, it's really kind of difficult in the culture that we have, because again, parents just kind of want that connection to their kids' own greatness. Coaches want connection to their kids' own greatness. So I think making sure you're coming together, and you have to have a really well written out plan. Don't just come in there and be like, we're here to build a championship culture. That's not going to cut it. You're going to have to have, what are those steps? What does that look like? What does that mean for my child? I always try to tell our players, when you're out in the community, you are not only carrying your parents' name, you're carrying the school's name, you're carrying the team's name, you're carrying the coach's name. You have a lot of responsibility when you're out in the community. And a culture starts all the way through every one of those steps. If you have any break in that link, that's where your problems come from. So making sure that parents are really on board with the mission that you have, that you're here to create greatness through their child, to make the place that their community something great that they're proud to be a part of. And I think if you can do that and get them to see the bigger picture that is beyond just their son or their daughter, I think that's the first steps.
And that's really good stuff, Coach. So, let me pick your brain. You guys won the state title, the 6A state championship, and I got to watch some of those games, and you had some very talented players, and you were in some very tough situations. That triple overtime game still blows my mind how you guys were able to come back from that. But the composure that your players had, the composure that your bench had in those situations, I feel like that's indicative of the culture that you guys have there at American Fork. So briefly describe kind of what your culture's like, for your players there. What are some of your non-negotiables, some of the basic things that make your program and that program so successful this past season?
Yeah. When we first came in, it was the culture we built out of this year was not done overnight. I really tip my hat to Coach Cuff at American Fork. I had coached for him before back down in Dixie and St. George. And so I knew I kind of had a heads up advantage. I knew exactly the kind of culture he creates and what he was expecting, as well as some of the other assistant coaches that came in. We had all coached for him before. But the culture before we got there was not that way. It was kind of like the culture we came into together, me and you, Swans, when we came into southwestern Wyoming.
That was bad.
The culture was just kind of, do what you need to do. If you're the best player, then, it's fine. If you miss practice, no big deal. You've been skipping out on class or your grades are slack, don't worry about it. They'll take care of it because you're the star player. We had a lot of star players. And so when you have a lot of star players and that's the mindset for all of them, it was really difficult, but it took all of us holding them accountable for each and every single action. If you were late to class, coaches were there. If you missed an assignment, coaches were on top of you. If you were late to practice, coaches were on top of you. If you didn't give a high five after someone gave you a great pass, coaches were on you. If you didn't listen to the instruction coach gave you coming out of a huddle, they were on you, and they didn't care who you were. And coach did a great job early in the year making examples out of our star players that if you're not going to follow what this culture is, there isn't going to be a place for you. I don't care who you are. And coach actually even said it in our summer games. He had one of our games where our star player just wasn't performing. He wasn't doing what he needed to do. He was going off doing his own thing. And coach, in the middle of the game, pulls him out. And with everyone ever being able to hear, I don't need you to win. This team does not need you to win. You can either play with your team and help make something great, or you can sit here and watch greatness happen. And I was like, holy, like only Coach Cuff can kind of pull that kind of stuff off. But it woke everybody up that if he's willing to do that with him, what's to say he wouldn't do that with me, and on a bigger scale, because what I'm producing right now isn't nearly what he can. And if Coach is willing to put that kid on the line and hold him accountable for every single action, well, you better believe I'm going to be held accountable as well. So it was a very slow process, and it took months and months and months, but it was having to catch them on every single thing. You had to hold them accountable for everything down the line. You couldn't let one thing slide.
How did the kids handle that, from the very beginning to the end? I know probably at the beginning it was tough for the kids. I bet there was a lot of frustration, probably a lot of anger as well. How did the kids respond, and how did that change over the course of the season?
It was really tough at first. It was really tough because, again, we were coming into a culture where the coach before never really challenged the kids like that. To be in someone's face and demand excellence out of them, they weren't used to that. They were used to being able to just kind of slide by on their God-given talents that they've had all through these years and just kind of getting away with it. So at first it was really tough. And kind of circling back to the beginning, what makes it even more difficult is when you're trying to hold a kid accountable, as we all probably know, when kids go home and talk to mom and dad, the truth doesn't always come out the right way.
Mm-hmm.
So you may say, hey, you know what? You need to hustle more on defense. You need to be able to lock down. And kid might go home and say, hey, you know what? Coach told me I'm a horrible defender. I'm never going to play. I don't know why I'm wasting my time here. Totally different scenario. Like they just take this simple command or demand and they make it into the story, because a lot of them don't like to be held, again, accountable. And so they're going to try and find the easy way out where mom and dad are going to swoop in and save me, keep me from being accountable. So at first it was really, really hard, because when he would challenge those players, that was what would happen. And a lot of times, it was funny enough, we even had some games where mom and dad, after the game, coaches, we all come together and we'll talk about what happened and the players and everything. We're all huddled together. And mom and dad are sitting on the bench, like right behind us, trying to like listen in and see what they're saying. And coach is like, you don't need to be here. Like, you guys need to move along. Let me handle my team. So it took, I want to say it was probably almost halfway through the year before I would say they finally got it, where they were bought into where I'm going to be held accountable for everything. Coach isn't going to let it slide. As you know, most kids will try and test you on things for a while. And once they found out, like, coach isn't going to let any of that slide, you may make a spectacular shot or an amazing dunk or whatever else, but if it was outside of our system, you knew you were coming right out. Like, there was one, we had a kid once, he totally went away from the play, made a spectacular dunk, went straight from the dunk and ran straight over to the bench. Like, he knew exactly what was coming. So again, it took a lot of time, but I think it's just being consistent with the players.
One important thing to know about this team, where you're talking about, how many Division I athletes did you have on this team?
Oh, geez. We ended up with 2 at the moment. One heading to Oregon, one heading to BYU, with 2 others that are most likely, they will probably be D1 within the next year. So they took a different route to try and help with their church callings. And then after that, they will probably move on and play D1 as well. So we had a really talented group. I mean, that's 4 seniors right there, plus our starting point guard was a freshman. So he'll be back this year as well. So we had a really, really stacked squad.
What was the early season meetings like with I'm sure the parent you had a parents meeting or whatever, and you discussed all these things that we wanted to foster within our cultural relationship. I mean, what was done, and then obviously when things happened and you wouldn't let it slide, then you had to you had to basically say, hey, remember we had this talk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we did. We had the preseason meeting, as most teams do, where you bring the parents in, you bring the players in, and we talk about what our goals are, what our destination is. And again, coach did a really great job of really just kind of putting the hammer down and telling parents, this is what I expect. If it's been, we had the pool too. I mean, it had been 40 years since American Fork had won a state championship. And through those years, they've had talented players where they easily could have. I mean, you take this team we had this year, for example, pretty much the exact same team the year before. They didn't even qualify for the state playoffs. So you go from that to a state championship team. So I really, again, it was just a real tip of my hat to coach, because he just came in again and was like, parents, listen, if you want what's been happening, keep doing what you've been doing. But if you guys want to change, if you want to do something great that hasn't happened here in 40 years, trust in me. And again, coach was coming straight off of a state championship from down in St. George just a year before. So again, he had multiple ones before at Lone Peak High School up here. So, you know, he had the track record to back up his talk, that he knew exactly what he was talking about. And if they wanted to be great, the parents were going to need to relinquish some of that control and just trust that he knew what was going to be best for the players. I think what it's really important too is, I think for a program to be successful, you got to have some parents that are all in. And when you can get some parents that are all in, and you can create that culture with them and allow them to step up and be your voice in the stands when you can't, I think that goes miles for you. And that's luckily enough for us. We had some difficult ones, but we also had some really great ones. And so when the difficult ones would, you know, start up in the stands or whatever else, we had the other ones that could reel them in, talk to them. And that went a really long way with this squad this year.
Okay, here's the $1 million question. How do you get 100% buy-in?
Someone needs to write that book. You know, again, I think it just starts with a little bit.
I started writing that book. Coach Swanson, a little bit of
it. That's going to be an encyclopedia by the time you're done. But I think what it takes really is, again, it's little moments. I think you have to build a relationship with the parents in little moments. And again, there's going to be some parents you're going to recognize right from the get-go that are going to have your back, that are going to be 100% supportive in what you're doing. You're going to have some that are going to be some snakes in the grass. I think the biggest thing to kind of distinguish the two is you kind of have to challenge each one and see how they react. And I think you have to do that early in the summer. If you really challenge a kid, I personally, I love the parents that come to me and be like, you know what? You can yell at my son more. You can get on him more. Like, he can handle it. That's fine. Like, you don't have to be so nice to him. I love that, because that tells me then, like, coach, like, I'm in this with you. Like, I want you to push my son to be the greatest. I don't want him to be comfortable in his role. I want you to push him and expand him. You find those ones, and I think that's like one of those little keys that you'll see is those parents that are actually asking you to give more. Not that you're asking to take more away. You're asking them to hold their son or their daughter more accountable for what they're doing than what they've been doing before. So I think when you can get those ones, build again on the relationship, get in little conversations about anything but basketball or football or whatever the sport is, you know, how's the family life? And I think, again, if you can extend that you care about the player, or you care about the person more than the player, I think that helps out tremendously in building respect for the parents, because in the long run, being a parent myself, like, if I'm giving my child over to you for months at a time, hours a day, I want to know that you really care about my son, that you really care about my daughter. I want to know that you have their best interest in heart. And I think, again, when you can find those little moments to build that with the parents, that you're really there for the person before the player, that once they see that, I think that's when you get parents that are willing to go to battle with you. And through my years, I've had both. And Swans can kind of attest to this. We had some parents that were willing to go to battle for us 100%. Mm-hmm. And then we had some other, like I said, snakes in the grass, really, that just wanted it their way. But like I said, when you can get those parents that have your back 100%, it helps a ton.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I think, you're giving us a lot of wisdom, a lot of knowledge out here, which I know all of our listeners are going to greatly appreciate. So let's shift our focus from the high school court to the AAU court. What makes AAU so unique? I know you're an AAU coach. You were telling me a couple of weeks ago that your AAU team's doing really well. What makes it so unique? What sets it apart from just basic high school basketball?
I think first off, it's just a different style. Most AAU clubs, I mean, when you look at your high school team, you're going to have your star player. You're going to kind of have your backup player, and then you just kind of go down the list from there. A lot of AAU programs, now some of the ones that are maybe just trying to start up, or maybe a smaller community, maybe not so much, but the big time programs, you got to understand that top 5 squad was the number 1 dude coming from their team. I mean, you basically are getting to watch college basketball before they were college basketball players. You get to see those guys develop. So the speed, so much more quicker. The athleticism, so much more quick. The X's and O's, not so much. Not so much. In high school, we spend a lot of time making sure we know our plays, that we're running through it. AAU's more kind of, here's a couple of plays that you can highlight a player's strength. Maybe he's a great athlete and can jump really high, or maybe he's a great shooter. And so you'll put in maybe just a couple sets that just allow those guys to accentuate whatever it is their strength is. So the AAU game is just a lot quicker. It's a lot more free flowing. Trying to go a whole game with only 2 timeouts too is difficult. So, as a coach, there's not a lot of strategy you can really put into it. So coming from a coaching standpoint, I mean, you really got to know your game, and you've got to be able to instruct in the moment. You got to be able to put almost a play in the moment without having to call a timeout. So you got to be able to instruct that, hey, you know what? I want a cross screen on the block into a ball screen out of a – you got to be able to explain all of that almost, if you're lucky, out of a free throw. You got to get everyone together and try and have your point guards explain that to everyone. So it is very fast and free flowing, as whereas high school, and this is my problem too with high school, which we still need to work on for basketball especially, is getting a shot clock. High school, some teams just pull it out. So I have, in all my years, I have not seen one AAU team that sat there with the ball and just worked it around. I mean, those guys are out there to play. And again, for most of them, they're out there trying to get scholarships. And sitting there just holding the ball in the corner is not getting you a scholarship. That's what coaches are going to come watch. That's not what they want to see.
Coach, I'll challenge you on that one quick. When we played Cal Supreme, we were up 6 minutes left. They held the ball. They held the ball.
I'm pretty sure they were scared. They didn't want to lose to a bunch of white boys from Wyoming. I remember
No, they didn't.
that was like my one and only I've ever seen in my life. But they were scared out of their shoes. They didn't know what to do. So that was my one example. I think we actually played them this weekend in California. So I hope Cal Supreme Summer is watching. So if you see me, Cal Supreme, don't hold the ball. You can play this time. It's all right.
Oh, that's good stuff. So, you've worked with plenty of athletes that have gone on to the next level. It doesn't matter. It's not just always D1. It's NAI. It's all that stuff. We have so many kids anymore that think they're college athletes. I don't care what sport it is, football, baseball, basketball, lacrosse, water polo, whatever. You hear parents say, oh, my kid's a college athlete. I don't think parents understand how hard it is to be a college athlete. I don't think they understand what it takes. So you working with those, with those kids, you working with other coaches that have the same goal. I mean, AAU's goal is to get kids to the next level. What are things that parents and players need to know about what it takes to get there?
I think, again, parents, for a lot of them, and you hear someone say, well, I played, and everything else. You got to understand that the college game was completely different. I mean, go back just 20 years even. Like the college game was totally different than what it is now, in all aspects. So I think the biggest hurdle I've seen most kids struggle with is the psychological aspect of it. You really have to have just kind of a killer's mentality when it comes to collegiate sports, because again, you're going from being the guy to just one of the guys. You're not going to be, for the most part, you're not going to be that star athlete coming in. Not all of us are going to be that Zion Williams coming in that everyone's been talking about since 7th grade. Like for the majority of college players, that's just not going to be you. And the psychological aspect of that, of how much time it really takes in the gym, on the field, to be a Zion Williams or one of those guys that just really stand out, I don't think they understand. And I don't think they understand either the rigors of having to have a full collegiate course load class-wise, on top of having to make sure you're taking care of your weightlifting, your study hall, your practices, your games, your travel. Like there's so many other aspects behind the scene that I don't think a lot of players see. They watch the highlights and they watch ESPN and all those little things, but I don't think for the most part a lot of players or parents really dive in and see what it really takes to survive. I have to say, even really survive at the collegiate level. It's just a completely different beast.
I do have to give some shout outs. David Smith is listening, and I'm sure he'll have a question here in just a few moments. And then Ramiz Khan, I'm not sure who that is, but hey, we are glad to have you on the air.
So Coach, you doing both, I know there are a lot of people, especially here in Southeast Iowa, we've had some, kids over the past, few months transfer because they think that going to a bigger school is going to get them college looks. Would you agree in saying that we're past the point where coaches come to the high school gym to watch kids play basketball anymore?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Those days are long gone, long gone. And the whole transfer thing too. Here's the thing most players need to understand. If you can play, coaches will find you. Flat out. I don't care if you're at a little 1A school somewhere out in the mountains. If you can play, a coach is going to find you. With all the things we have now with the social media and everything else, if you can play, someone's going to come find you. You're not going to be sitting out in the woods like no one's going to come see you. They'll find you. And I think, again, a lot of our players think, oh, if I'm on a bigger scene, I'm going to get seen more. But here's the thing, and that I heard this year's, I believe it was Tom Crean that said it, and it's going to kind of go back to AAU ball as well, as they think, oh, if I make it to this team or whatever else. But you're either getting exposure or you're getting exposed. And I think a lot of kids think they're joining a team or going to a bigger school, whatever it is, to get exposure, when really all they did was expose themselves. They may have been the best player on their team, and they take off and go to a bigger school with more talented athletes, and all of a sudden, when people used to be telling you how great you are, all of a sudden you just got exposed. That you can't make a move going to your left, you can't shoot a jump shot, you can't play deep, whatever it is. You probably just exposed yourself more than you actually helped yourself. So my advice would be, succeed where you're at. Be the best at where you are. If your dream is always to move on and go on to a bigger school, if you're doing your job, high school, I talk in college here, high school, you're kind of limited to where you are. But again, if you can play, coaches are going to find you. When you get to college, be a star in your role where you're at. And again, coaches are always looking for players. So if you're great at something at your place, at your school, start in that, own that, and coaches will find you. I think they try way too often, looking for the grass is always greener on the other side spot instead of trying to water their own grass.
I like that. The grass is greener on the other side. You should water your own grass, and I've heard that before. But I really like looking for exposure. You might get exposed. That's pretty interesting because throughout my entire coaching career, and I've been coaching a long time. There's a lot of times kids will leave an area thinking the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, and then 10 years down the road they're saying, oh man, that was a bad decision. So they have to be cognizant of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think it comes from, sometimes unfortunately I think it comes from the circles. It may be parents, it may be friends, again, maybe in the high school level, AAU or anything like that, where they're like, hey, you're too good to be at that school. You're too good to be at that place. You should be playing at so-and-so. And then they get there and find out, oh, you know what? Like where I was at, I had it pretty good. And, to try and go back now like that, it's going to make you look even worse. So again, I just think players they're too concerned about trying to move on instead of just being, like I said, I think if you take care of home and you're trying to be the best at where you're at, the opportunities will find you.
Sure. Great stuff again, Coach. Great stuff. So, when it comes down to it, you've worked with some great coaches. You've been an athletic director, before. What makes a great coach? You've worked with Coach Cuff for quite a while, and he's got state championships like crazy. What makes a great coach? What are some special qualities that you've seen are fairly common amongst the coaches that can build programs and can turn out great players and have consecutive and consistent winning seasons?
Yeah, I think the first part is you just you have to have a real passion. As we all know as coaches, but when you work out how much you're getting paid and everything else, it's, as I think we did once before Swans, I think it was like cents an hour. It's you can't be in it expecting to see dollar signs. You really got to be in it for the love of the sport, for the love of the kids. So I think spending that time and just being, again, just a student of the game consistently. I think that's something that's great about Coach Cuff is he's always a student. He's never been the guy that thinks he knows it all. You know, if you think like, hey, this is a play I think we should run or this would be great, he's more than happy to hear about it. If you come to him with an idea, he's more than happy again to hear about it. So always consistently knowing that, like, it, as Wooden would say, right? Like, it's when you know it all that you, or how did Wooden put it again?
I think it's like when you know it all, you know nothing.
That's true.
There you go. Like,
Something like that.
You know, or when you think you know it all, you know nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really true. And especially again with the way the game is changing, it used to be back in the day, you know, you would basically almost pick out the players that fit your system. Now you got to find a system that fits the players. So if you're not willing to grow as a coach and find something that fits the players you have, you're not going to make it. It's like, again, it's not like it was back in the day when it was like, no, this is just how it's done. You're going to run my system. This is just what we do. Because there's going to be years, especially high school again, you don't get to really recruit who comes into your school. If you got a bunch of 5'2" heavier set kids and you're a run and gun guy, you're going to find yourself in trouble. If you're a trap and sprint guy, you're going to find yourself in some difficult situations. So you're going to have to be able to have enough in your pocket to adjust to who's actually coming through your system. So you're going to have to be able to adjust with what you have. The other thing I think that's huge, and this was something that, you know, bless my wife, I think you got to have a wife. If you're married, you really got to have a spouse that like understands the grind that it takes, because there are going to be a lot of late nights. There's going to be a lot of nights of putting the kids to bed by themselves. And if you've got a spouse that doesn't really understand that and you're coming home to just getting hammered, it's not gonna go well for you. I think my joke always was like, I'm either surprised I'm still coaching or surprised I'm still married, because it's that much of a grind. Like I said, when you think about all the things you're doing, film, practice, summer camps, time after games, like it's just a lot. So having someone at home that's understanding and supportive, I think is a really big deal as well. I would say too, as a coach, the thing that makes them successful is being able to relate to their players, being able to build a rapport and a standard of trust with all their players. Now, you don't have to necessarily be best friends or get along with all your players, but I think there has to be that level of respect with all your players. Again, it only takes one bad apple to ruin the batch. And so you've got to be able to know and be a little bit of a psychologist. As they say, coaches wear a lot of different hats, and it's very true. You've got to wear a hat of a psychologist, a nurse, and mom, dad, brother, sister. You've got to be able to have all these hats that you can put on at any time. So the successful ones that I've seen are the ones that are able to put on those different hats and know when they're needed.
Now, I hate to chime in here, coaches, but we are about 5 minutes and 30 seconds away from the end of the broadcast. Can you believe it goes that fast?
It's gone by quick today.
Always does.
So, one last question, Coach. This is something I've always been curious about. I owe you so much for me getting my start out here, and most importantly, for giving me a start in coaching. When I applied and I met you, and all that stuff, it was great. I didn't know who else all applied, but I remember it was you, me, Neil, and Darren Anderson in there, our first coaches meeting. And me being 23 years old, I was expecting to be the freshman coach. Why'd you pick me as the JV coach? That's not something I ever could have imagined, ever dreamed of, being 23 years old. So what qualities did you look at as, me to be an assistant, at a 4A program at 23 years old?
It was the beard.
The beard. It was the beard.
Oh, goodness.
No, in all honesty, everyone else, as great as they were, I was looking for someone that could match my passion and my desire. I was looking for someone that I felt was really willing to put in as many hours as I was. And just from the interview I had with you, I was like, this is the guy. Like, this guy is the one that when I'm at the gym, he's still going to be there. If I have to put in extra hours, he's going to be there with me. We had some other applicants. I remember one question was, how much time are you willing to put into the program? And the guy's response was, I guess probably about as much as you need. I was like, okay, well, thanks for your time. I appreciate that. But like I said, for yours, like you just had this kind of passion that just kind of came through in the interview where I was like, this guy is on my level. Like this guy is someone that I can roll with and I know is going to be able to match me and help me get these kids to where I needed them to be. I didn't look at age or any of that stuff or what your past experience was, because I've always felt, I was the same way. I got my start scraping gum off a floor. That was it. Like that was how I got into coaching. Was I had a coach previously that was nice enough to let me scrape gum off the floor before practices, and that got my way in. So I never looked at, what have you done before, because everyone needs to start somewhere. So I was just looking for someone that was willing to learn and was as passionate about it as I was, and that was you. So I jumped right on it. I was like, please don't tell me no. I was more afraid of you telling me no than the other way around.
Oh, that wasn't going to happen.
All right, Coach, we have 3 minutes, but we have one more question. So you're going to have about 90 seconds to answer this question. This comes from David Smith. What is your thoughts about parents trying to dictate coaching staffs?
So like trying to have an influence on which coaches are picked as coaches?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I personally think you can't have it. Again, I think this comes down to a supportive administration. You've got to have an administration that has your back and has your vision as well. The moment you start letting parents call the shots at that high of a level of who's going to be part of the coaching staff, you might as well wrap it up. Because if they've got that much pull to tell you who you have to hire, believe me, they have enough pull to tell you what you need to run and who you're going to keep as a player. So yeah. I don't. If you find yourself in that situation and your administrator comes to you and be like, hey, this is going to be one of your assistants because a parent told me that's what needs to happen, I'm sorry to tell you, you probably want to start looking for another place to be.
Yeah. All right. Well, you know what, Coach Harmon, Coach Swanson, it's always amazing and how quick this stuff takes place. Here before we do the end shout outs, I do want to let everybody know that the CCA Broadcast Network is sponsored by the new book. It's titled The Mad Culture Present in Athletics. It is available today. And you know what? I'm doing a $15 special. Okay. It includes shipping and coaching staffs. If you want to purchase more than that, you can pay $15 for the first book and then $7 for each additional copy. We appreciate you guys, coming out to watch us, to listen. Be sure to follow us on Twitter. That's at CCA Culture, and on Facebook, Coaching Culture in Athletics. Final shout out. We got about 1:10.
I just want to thank Coach Harmon for coming on. Coach, tell your family, I miss them. I wish them all the best. Your kids are great. Your wife has been wonderful through all of this. I appreciate you coming on so much.
Oh, I appreciate it. I loved it. The kids still talk about you all the time. Every time I tell them, I was like, hey, I was just talking to Swans today. Like, oh, I miss Swans.
They said
you got to come back out for a visit somewhere.
I'll be out there soon.
Okay. Awesome. Well, all right. We're going to wrap it up. Good night, everybody.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.